say over break. So I just want to make sure that you have the stuff ready to go. The next step is going to be going into ZBrush. So you will, there's like a 15-day trial, and there's about 23 days left of class, so you can kind of balance, your 15-day trial with that. So what we have to do is prep the head to go into ZBrush. So before I do that, what I wanted to show is a couple more techniques for kind of tweaking your shape, and then we'll go into that. So one thing I can do is if I go to my sculpt menu and I go to brushes and I click the little pull off tab, I'll get this little pull off menu. And these are all different basically brushes we can use on top of our character. So one of them is a pull brush, and this is actually pretty sweet. Bless you. I'm going to go to my points. I'm going to go to my pull brush. I'm going to make sure that I have everything selected. So there we go. Everything's selected. I'm on my pull brush. Cool. And then I'm just going to click and drag. Now my settings are already like set up to paint on him. By default it comes in with crazy settings like this. So it pulls it like a whole lot. Anything you do, you want it to be gradual. So you always start off with really low settings and build up to something that's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to take the pressure down, and the pressure is how much it's pulling it out. And then I'm also going to adjust my size that's right here to something appropriate. Everyone's file is different, so your size may be huge or small. Mine's about here, so that's where I'm at. The little arrow, the little insignia here, this little icon in the center, that's showing you the drop off of your brush. So the very center of your brush will be very hard, so it'll actually go like 20% up, and then the sides of it are tapered, so you see how it's kind of like softens it. So it's very similar to like a brush in Photoshop that has like softer edges. You can adjust certain things like the fall off here by going to this and then pulling it up. And if I do that, you see I have a straight line. And so it's basically going to be a little bit more blocky as I start to push and pull things out of there. We don't really have a lot of points that we're manipulating, so it's not a huge deal. But just so you're aware of it, that's what that's doing. There's also things like symmetry. This doesn't apply to us because we're doing only one side and it's automatically doing that. There's stencil, there's modifiers, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm going to go back to my settings, make sure my pressure is down, make sure my size is appropriate, and I can just kind of pull out some of these points here. Okay, so remember I said that we wanted to make sure that our divisions are kind of uniform across the entire surface. With the exception of like the eyes and the mouth, that's going to be true. So if you look at the shape or the divisions in my face, you'll see that the eye is a pretty tight packed bit of points, the mouth is pretty tight, but then everything else is pretty even. There is a little bit here that's that is kind of like squished together, a little bit more condensed. So what I can do is come over to this side and I can try to pull these apart a little bit maybe, or I can go to smooth and try to smooth these apart. Okay. Now every time I switch brushes, it's going to also switch my settings back to what I had before. So when I go to pull, you'll see my settings are there. When I go to smooth, they go back to there. Now you could also hold down shift when you're in any of these brushes, and it'll toggle you to smooth. So that's kind of like I just stay on pull most of the time. And I'll pull these points out like this, and then I can hold shift and then kind of smooth out some of those other areas. Okay, so I'm just smoothing out some of these areas that are a little bit chunky that I don't want those to be there. Okay, and this area here, maybe I'll just smooth this out. And by smoothing these, what it does is you have to be careful because it's basically saying, here's where this point is, here's where this point is. If I had another point in the middle that's like way down here, it's going to gradually start to bring it up to basically the average of those 2 points. So what could happen is it could flatten it out like way too much, right? So if I just go crazy on this thing, just to show you, let me crank this up and go to smooth. There we go. And I start to smooth this out way too much, you'll see that the side of my head is not really smooth, it's just kind of like caving itself in. So you have to be very careful of that you don't do it. That's why pull is so great, because as you're pulling the points out, you smooth them and then they blend in. You pull them out, you smooth them, pull them out and smooth them. So typically I'll use pull and smooth to do that kind of thing.
How did you bring up that menu?
Under sculpt and then brushes. Okay. So let's say that that is good, because it actually is pretty decent there. The divisions are nicely laid out over the entire thing. Okay. What we don't want, just so you can see what we don't want, is if I were to go into my divisions here, and I'm just going to exaggerate this, I'm going to dissolve my points like that. There we go. So you'll see how we have tight faces here, and then we have this big gap, and then we have tight faces again. That's going to look weird when we start sculpting it, because basically that area that doesn't have squares there is going to look really funky. It's going to basically stretch out all the detail we have. So if we were to put scales on this thing, the scales would be stretched out in that area, and that would look ridiculous. So we don't want that. Nice and neat, just like that. Cool. So before I finish this up, I need to make sure it's symmetrical again. As we start sculpting stuff, if we get anywhere near the center line, it'll actually pull it away from the center line, okay? And just to show that, if I hide this sphere and tumble around, you'll see that there's a couple spots here that did actually get separated while I was tweaking that. So I'm going to double click this center edge. I'm going to my scale tool. I'm going to click and drag and then hold shift until it goes to 0. Perfect. I'm going to switch to my move tool and this view. Make sure my snap is on, which I believe it is, and there we go. Okay. So now that's nice and neat right in that same spot. I can turn off my head and verify that for sure this is all laid out nicely. Now it is kind of crimped back here. I think I do want to just correct that real quick. Don't be afraid to turn off your subdivision just so you can see where the points are, so that you can tweak them. So I'm going to grab these points here and just kind of pull them a little bit further apart. Okay, now these ones here I can move up and down, or I can move in and out, but I can't move them in the red because that would be a bad thing. That'll undo the symmetrical stuff I just did. So just kind of evening those out a little bit more. This time spent doing this will definitely pay off once you're inside of ZBrush. Okay, I'll pull that one a little bit further. Okay. So now if I turn this one off, you can see I don't really have that crimp as much as I did before. A little bit still there, but I can take care of that later. All right. So what I need to do now is I need to save it. So I'm going to hit Control S to save it. And I need to make this into a surface that ZBrush will read. Right now, if I bring it in, it's not going to know what to do with the subdivision, what to do with the symmetry, what to do with the instance. The only thing it'll actually bring in is the sphere. That's the only thing it will, like the half of a head. And it may not even do that. So I'm going to take my symmetry node, and I'm going to hit C on my symmetry node to actually make that an object. Okay? So now this sphere instance is the entire head. All connected, all ready to go. This stuff I don't need anymore, so I can just delete that. So this is my base head, and you can see how simple the base head is. It's not like a trillion divisions anywhere on it. It's just very, very simple. So I'm going to save this as, because I don't want to overwrite my other one in case I need to go back to it. I'll save this as 4. And then what I'm going to do is I need to export this guy out of here so I can bring him into ZBrush. In Keyshot, we were able to just bring our cinema file right into it. ZBrush is not like that. ZBrush wants a specific kind of file, and that specific file is an OBJ. So I'm going to go to File, Export, and say Wavefront OBJ. And I will call this Exported Head. And all the settings are great. Perfect. Now, going between different software packages, you will find that OBJ or FBX are two formats that do go between all these different programs. So if you ever need to get from Maya to Cinema to 3ds Max to Keyshot to whatever, those two formats are typically universal across the board. All right. So I'm going to make a brand new project. Where did my project go? My menu moved. Document, new document, there it is. No. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this is ZBrush's interface, and when you start it up, it'll look like this. There's a little menu here that comes up. This is called Lightbox. So all we have to do is click Lightbox, and it goes away. So before we bring the head in, just a brief overview of what ZBrush is. It started off as a 2D painting tool. So if I just switch this to a simple brush, and I start painting, you can see how this is like painting a simple square brush. But what's neat about it is as I go over some of these areas, it's actually like stacking my brush on top of other areas. So in this sense, it's actually like a 2D painting program that makes stuff look like it's in 3D. This is not 3D right now. If I try to spin around my object, it doesn't do anything. It's just like, that's it. That's what you got, okay? So I can do this. I can change my strokes over here to different things. You know, whatever. Whatever, okay? So it started off as a 2D painting program, and gradually what it evolved into is a 3D sculpting program, a way for us to actually take geometry and sculpt onto it. Now, when we were inside of Cinema and I was using these sculpting brushes here, they're nice, but they're very limiting because Cinema can't handle as many polygons, as many divisions as ZBrush can. In order for me to go into, let's say, this area right here and paint a scar that he got when he was a kid, I can't do that without a trillion divisions, okay? Not really a trillion, but a lot. ZBrush is great at handling that kind of thing, all right? So I'm gonna go over here to my tools, and I'm going to import my dude. So I'm gonna find my exported head, there it is, and I'm gonna say open. Now it puts it right here. Now this is one of the confusing things about ZBrush, is that this is not like a piece of geometry sitting inside of your area. It's actually a tool, okay? Just like this simple brush is a tool, my head is a tool. That didn't sound right. But if I were to click and drag, you'll see that I'm actually painting now with that head. Okay? Now for whatever reason you may at some point decide you wanted to do this, but I've never found a use for it. Okay? There we go. Even as I paint on top of these, you'll see that he's actually contouring. Contouring, I said that weird. Contouring to the head surface itself. So it does have some kind of neat application in how you can do this kind of thing, but it's definitely not what we're going to use it for. So I'm going to go over to color, and I'm going to say clear to clear off my canvas. Okay, it basically just like wipes everything away. Then I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on my head. I'm going to click and drag one copy. I can hold shift. It's not going to let me. I'll just click it like that, okay? Now, right now, it's basically like a flat image. That's all it is right now. It's reading the 3D geometry, and it's kind of in this like limbo space of do you want it to be 3D or do you want this to be 2D? One magic button makes it 3D, and the button is T, which is for edit, and it's right here. So you can see the edit button right there. So I hit T, there we go. And what happens is if you look at my screen, look at the border of my screen, there's nothing there. If I hit T, the screen gets a little highlight there, meaning now you're working in 3D, okay? Incredibly frustrating when you first start ZBrush if you don't remember that step. Now for hotkeys for this, you may want to write these down. The Alt key and left mouse button will be a panning button. Turn out a light too if we need to. If we watch our stuff. Never mind, we will not turn on a light. It'll work in the dark. So Alt and left mouse button will allow you to move around the scene, right? Just like inside Cinema where we can basically see this part of the scene or that part of the scene. Okay? If I hit Control and, oops, sorry. Oh no, sorry. It is Alt. There you go. Just you don't need another button. It's just like click and drag with your mouse outside this. Okay, and that will be your orbiter. So no button and clicking and dragging will let you spin around your character like this, so you can actually see the front of the character. Now what I do is I hold Shift, and that will let you like basically like lock into the different views. ZBrush does not have like your front, top, right side views. It basically just has this viewport, this one view we're working in, and that's it. So if we want to see the front, we have to click and drag and hold Shift until we lock this into the front. And sometimes it takes like a couple tries to get it there, okay? Now Control and right click button, that's the one, is your zooming in and out. So if you hold Control and use the right mouse button, that will zoom you in and out of your character. Okay, so we have, dang it, wrong button again. Alt and left mouse button, Control and right mouse button, and then no button and just left mouse. Okay, there's other ways to get to those too, but those are the ones that I typically use. Eventually they'll just become second nature. You can also use your, no, you could use your scroll wheel, apparently not. Maybe I just don't have it disabled. Now all of those too you have to do off of the model. if I'm on the model and I hold down Alt and I left click and drag, you can see what happens. Okay, he just goes crazy. So you have to make sure that you're off the model, and then you can click and drag, and then it'll be cool. Okay, that's what this outside box is for. Sometimes you're zoomed up like right on top of the model like this, like that, and you want to spin around. Well, right now I can't spin around because I'm on the model, so I go outside the box and then I can spin around, and then I can zoom out, and then I can move this over. That's what it is. Control and right mouse button is your zoom out. Alt and right mouse button will also do that. There we go. That's the ones I typically use. Okay, so so there he is. So now that we have him placed on our canvas, now we can go through and start to sculpt him. Now if you look at the top here, a couple important areas. At the top is all of our settings for whatever it is we're working on. So right now we have a 340 active points on this dude. That means there's 340 active vertices or points that created this guy. Now again, that's still not a lot. That's exactly what we had inside of Cinema right here. This is 340 points still, so we still can't go in and add that extra detail. So now we're going to learn a second hotkey, which is Control D. Okay, and Control D will take our subdivisions and smooth them out. Okay, so wherever we were before, I think it said 390, it's going to multiply it times 4. So it's roughly 1358. Okay, so now we have more divisions, and you can definitely see that based on all the divisions that are now on the character. So now it's smoothing him out. So when we were in Cinema and we put the subdivision surface on there, that smooths him out. This Control D button smooths him out. I'm going to hit Control D again. Boop. And now he's even smoother. I'm going to hit it again. And now he's even smoother. I'm going to hit it again. And now he's even smoother. And every time I hit Control D, it's adding more divisions. It's essentially doing it about 4 times. Every time I hit Control D, I'm going to get 4 times as many points. So right now, if you look at the top, I have 1.388 million different points that are on this dude. And what that means is I can go in here very specifically and pull out certain areas or push in certain areas and create these really smooth transitions between them. I could also go into one of my brushes, there we go, and I could change this to, I'm going to change my brush real quick to scales. Come on. There we go. And you can see the detail that I can add to this character just by doing that. Now, if I was at the super low resolution, I wouldn't be able to do exactly what I just did. That would come up super duper blocky. Imagine you have a photo in Photoshop and the resolution is like crap, like super small, like 100 pixels or something. You can't do much with it. But if you have 1,000,000 pixels, you can do a lot with it. You can do a whole lot with it. Now this does actually bump it out. If I spin around and I zoom in, you can actually see that it definitely is bumped out, right? And if I spin around a little bit more, there we go. Now, if I wanted this to bump out more or bump in less, I can go to my Z intensity, which is up here, and that's what's going to control how much it's bumping. Z is basically the depth of your bump. So as I pull this down, you'll see that it goes to, like, let's say 3. And as I click and drag here, you'll see that now it's super duper subtle how we have those. If I crank it up really far, boom. You can see what that looks like. Okay, and like I said, it definitely is bumping it out, which is the awesome part of this. Let me switch this to something else just to kind of get the idea across. There we go. So these are like vein things that we could add. So I'm just going to add these little veins. That's way too much, so I take my intensity down. Holy cow, let's undo that. I'm going to undo all this little deformation I just did. There we go. So now we have these like veins that are on the side of his head, right? That's kind of neat. We can also go into here and I could pick, this is skin pores, and I can start painting skin pores. Now what you'll notice is the skin pores are huge. Our skin pores are typically not that big. They're super duper tiny and you have to really look close to see them. So up here we also have the draw size. The draw size is your brush size. Okay, so just like in Photoshop, the bigger the brush, the bigger the brush. The smaller the brush, the smaller the brush. So if I shrink this down, now that brush here is going to be super tiny. So that as I start painting, let me zoom in so we can see it. As I start painting, you can see that skin pore detail. Now, if we look at this, the detail here is essentially not even there, okay? Because of the resolution of my character's head right now, I don't have enough resolution to even show this brush at such a small size. So I'm going to hit undo a couple times. There we go. I'm going to hit Control D again a couple times. And this is going to take me up to 5 million. So now when I click and drag here, you can see how we have skin pore detail right there. Okay? And if it's still kind of grainy, I could hit Control D again. Now it's going to be 20 million. And now I can get even finer detail inside there. Okay? Now, we have to keep in mind what we're actually going to be looking at. We're not going to be zoomed up super close to the character, so there's no point in putting like the hair that would be growing out of his face right there that you wouldn't really see. We need to be looking at it at this resolution, maybe, you know, a little bit closer, like maybe like that, and have this kind of detail, but we don't need to worry about 20 million polygons for this one. Okay, so I'm just going to hit undo a couple more times. Now, every time you do something like that, it just adds more and more detail to it, but obviously slower and slower system. All of your undos, too, if you've noticed, are up here. So everything I've done so far goes back to this. So if I were just to click here, it takes me all the way back to when I first opened ZBrush. There we go. Let's go up a little bit further. There he is. So now if I go back to there, here's where we started off with this character. Okay? So I'm going to Control D it a couple more times. Now this is one of the nice things about ZBrush, is that we can work at this fine resolution. Let me just reset this. That's good there. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just kind of pulling out some of this. Let me make this a little bit more intense. There we go. Okay, so I can go ahead and pull out some of this detail, a little bit more information here, whatever. Cool. Awesome. All right, so I basically gave him just a little bit more of a forehead on here. Now let's pretend that I wanted to go back to where he was really rough. I don't have to undo everything. ZBrush allows me to walk my resolution down to a lower resolution up to a higher resolution depending on how I feel. So if I hold down Shift and hit D, you'll see up here my active points went from 86 to 21. I hit Shift D again, it goes to 5,000. I hit Shift D again, it goes to 1,300. I hit Shift D again, we're back to 340. So what it does is it maintains a hierarchy of all these different resolutions. And you can make changes at any point and it'll affect all the other areas. So if I decided here I wanted this to be really big, I can go into my move tool and just go like this and go like that. And then go here and go like this and go like that. Okay? Now at that resolution, it does it. And then that information will transfer to all the other areas. So now to get back up to the different resolution, I just hit D, 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 and D. Okay? So you'll see that that change that I just did to his forehead is now huge. It's all on top of that stuff. If I go in here to my, what brush do I want? Yeah, the damn standard's fine. All right, so let's say I did this. Gorgeous. And then I hit Shift D a bunch of times. You'll see that that transfer is all gone. That's like totally gone. But then as I start to tweak stuff again, ZBrush will remember, there's a little bit of it right here. ZBrush will remember what detail was on the one layer and it'll apply it. So no matter what I do here, I can still go back and tweak stuff. Perfect. I hit D again. And that information you'll see is still there. It's a weird guy. Okay. So that's, again, another nice thing about ZBrush and how it works. Okay, so now let's get to the actual stuff. I'm going to reset my dude, so I'm just going to go back to here, right there. All right, so there's about 5 brushes that I use pretty much every single time I'm in ZBrush. Number 1 is the Move brush, okay? Now you can get to any brush by clicking here and seeing all the brushes that are there, okay? Also, any of these things that we've already talked about, the Z intensity or the draw size, you'll see there's also a hotkey on the far right. So I'm not giving you those now, but get used to using those because they're so, they save so much time, right? So when I go to my size, I just hit the button and then I can change my size. I hit my U button, I can change my Z intensity, okay? So I'm always doing that. You can also right click and it'll bring up your draw size and all the other stuff, the move tool and everything. So you can do this, or you can hit B. B is the hotkey to bring up all of your brushes. And all the brushes have their own hotkey also. So just like Cinema, where we hit M, and that brings up one menu, then we hit S, and it brings up that specific tool. These brushes work the same way, okay? So if I want to go to, let me switch to a different brush so we can see this. If I want to go to the Move brush, I would hit B to bring up my brushes, M to go to my Move tools, okay? Basically anything that starts with M, magnify, mask circle, straight down the line to Move. And you'll notice in the top left corner of Move, there's a tiny little V. So that's its hotkey. So when I hit B, and then hit M, and then hit V, you'll see that that gets me right to my Move tool, okay? So you'll see me pop in BMV, Move tool, okay? Much easier. Or BDS is the next tool I would use. BDS is the damn standard brush, okay? And I'll show you what it's for. It's really an awesome tool. It says damn standard, but it's Damien standard, I guess the guy who made it. But it's really cool because we can get into these areas like the eyelids, and oops, and I can change my Z intensity a bit. And you can see how I can like crease these areas using this damn standard brush. Now, when they create ZBrush and they're doing all these brushes, they're actually consulting with people who do like clay sculpting. Like when you're clay sculpting, what tools do you use? What things should we have in here? And they build these tools for those specific reasons. So this was one of those tools that that came of that. Okay, and you can see a huge difference in this eye, which is a bit softer, than this eye, which has some crisping done to it. All right, so the BMV for the Move tool, BDS for the damn standard, and then BCB is the clay buildup. Okay, and the clay buildup is nice. If you've ever watched last year around Halloween, they had a show on Science Channel or something where they were basically making all these creatures for like Halloween decorations. It was basically how do you make Halloween decorations. It was totally awesome. But they start off with clay. Like there's some guys, their job was to go through and like sculpt out exactly what they want any of the props to look like. So they will need a three-headed dog. So someone goes in with these mounds of clay and they're like sculpting these three-headed dogs. And so what they would do is they need more clay. They would just slap it on there and slap it on there and slap it on there to build it up. That's what this tool does, is it builds up clay. So if you needed like more area in certain spots like this, you can create more area by doing some clay buildup in there. Okay, which is again pretty sweet. You needed, let's say, nostrils, right? Oops. I could shrink my brush a bit, not that much, and I could start adding in some nostrils here. Okay, and add a little bit tip of the nose. Cool. Now all of the brushes have hotkeys too. So remember in Cinema, I said if you hold down Shift, it switches to Smooth. ZBrush does the same thing. So if I hold Shift, I switch to my Smooth brush. That's the other brush I use. And this allows me just to go ahead and smooth out some of that stuff. So typically you do a clay buildup and then you smooth. You do a clay buildup and you smooth. Okay, so I'm typically bouncing around between those two brushes quite a bit. There we go. Now the other hotkey they have is Alt. Alt is the opposite. So as I do clay buildup here, and I'm adding clay basically to my character, if I hold down Alt and I do it, it'll subtract areas. So where that could be helpful is like in the nostril area. If I shrink my brush down quite a bit, I don't do that, I hit Alt, I push that in, I push this in, you can see how I can start to shape what the nostrils are looking like. Again, don't look at what the nostrils look like now, this is just a demo. I'm going to fix that. That looks pretty hideous. So we have the damn standard, we have the clay buildup, we have the Move brush, we have the Smooth brush, and then randomly I'll use some other ones, but the other one I use is just standard, okay? Just the standard brush, which is BST, yeah, BST. And this is just a good standard brush just to kind of, you know, shape it a little bit here or there. It just kind of pulls it out uniformly, okay? So those are typically the 5 brushes I'm going to use. So far we know how to bring our model in, drag it to the desktop, or drag it to our work area, make it editable. We know how to tweak the brush settings. We know how to change the brushes. Now we should actually know like how to do something on this that looks better than this. Okay, so let's jump back to the beginning. There we go. All right, so my first step in this is if I'm working on my home computer or on a project, I have a tablet. Like ZBrush works with a tablet fantastically. You typically want to work with a tablet as best you can, or as most of the time when you can, because it is pressure sensitive. So if I'm doing facial detail and I'm sculpting something, I want to be able to put little fine lines in there in some areas and really harsh lines in other areas without having to constantly change this. So a tablet is not a must, but definitely something you should experiment with before the semester's over. So the first thing I do on this character is I just get my proportions. You want to do everything that's kind of like big at the lower resolution. So if you don't like the way his head is shaped or his nose is shaped or positioning of things, this is the spot to do all of that stuff in. So let's say that this is our base head. I don't like how pointy it is back here. I need to fix that. I don't like where his eyes are or his nose are or chin is or any of that stuff. I want to fix it at this lower resolution. And gradually, as I start adding more detail to this, that's when I start adding more resolution. So I'm going to switch to my Move tool, which is BMV. Remember the BMV? I'm going to switch to the front view. And everything I do, I want to be symmetrical. What? I want it to be symmetrical. There we go. So I'm going to go under Transform, and here's where I can activate my symmetry. So I go Badoom, and now I have symmetry. So as I pull one side, it'll pull the other side. So now I can start to go through and kind of shape my character a bit more. So all I'm doing here is just kind of getting a general idea. That looks really weird. Holy cow. What did I do there? There we go. That's a bit better. There we go. So all I'm doing is kind of shaping what his skull is going to look like from that base head. Okay, maybe I'll pull this out a little bit more too and kind of push this in. Shrink my brush down a little bit more. Now, I am getting some flickering here. You can kind of ignore the flickering a bit. I'm not doing any smoothing at this point. I'm just kind of adjusting my settings. Adjusting these point placements. Okay. The nice thing about having a base head is you can really use this as your starting point for lots of different kinds of characters because you have the structure there. It's just a matter of how you want it to look in the end. Okay, like let's say I want him to have, a big jaw. I can go ahead and pull out the jaw area. Okay, you can see how I have a really pronounced jaw. That's kind of cool. Okay, so it's really neat how quickly we can kind of shape and basically redefine what our character looks like. Not terribly too much different from this one, but there's definitely a different, more style to this one, a more completed look to it, where we're actually trying to build in what we want that end image to look like. All right, that should be good for now. I'm going to just kind of push this in a little bit more, maybe pull this out a little bit more. Okay, I want to make sure that the base of him is pretty flat because eventually I'd like to print him. And if I do, I want to make sure I have plenty of base to do that. Okay, and eventually this will be flat, so I don't want to go too crazy and like pull it down to here, right? If I was doing more of like a torso or something, I would definitely want to pull this down, but for my 3D print, I don't need all that stuff. All right, that should be good. So now I can hit Control D and then go to the next level of what his information is, right? So the first level is just kind of like overall placement. Now we're going a little bit further, a little bit more refined, and starting to tweak some of the stuff. So maybe I want to pull the cheeks out a little bit more. I want to push this down a little bit more. I don't like this crease or crimp that's happening right here on the bridge of the nose. So I could shrink my brush, hold down Shift to smooth, and just kind of soften that a bit. There we go, that's good. Now I'm back into the Move tool, and I'm just kind of tweaking some of these points. There you go. I like the kind of like the short nose right there. That looks kind of neat. There you go. All right, that's cool. So I'm going to hit Control D again. And every time I hit Control D, I'm kind of going through and just reshaping some of these points. Just redefining, again, what I want this to look like. You have to move around your character. If you don't move around, you're going to like lose some of that detail that you had in there. My smooth is just a bit too intense. There we go. Okay, so far I've used two brushes, the move and the smooth. There we go. I think I need to give him more of a forehead, like more of a domey kind of forehead. And this is where you can see, like as I pull this, you can see there's definitely a bump, where had I hit Shift D and gone back to this version, I don't get that bump. It'll actually translate nicely into this area, so I don't get any weird bumps while I'm doing that. So sometimes you'll see me bounce around into different spots. And you can see how I'm kind of approaching this from basically every angle. There we go. So that's pretty good. Oops. And I've kind of taken away his neck some, so let me shrink this down. I'm just going to give him a bit more of a neck. There we go. That's looking good. Whoops. It fell down. All right. So now I can hit Control D again, and the process just continues. Just smoothing out areas that I don't like that are smooth. At this point, I think I'm going to use my clay buildup and start defining some of these areas a bit more. So like, that's way too much. The intensity down to like 8. Take it down to 3 or 4. There we go. So now I'm using my clay buildup just to give them maybe a little bit more pronounced eyebrow area, and then just kind of softening those edges a little bit. And I can start to round the eyes a little bit more too. There we go. We'll take some little area in the nose. Hold down Alt and we can add some little indications of nostrils. Now you don't want to go too far like into it. Eventually you'll color these things black just so you can see it. But something like that is typically sufficient to start off. You don't want to get too involved in it. You want to keep it really loose and really light. Think of like if you were to do a sculpture of a person or anything. You don't want to focus one area and try to get like the hand to look perfect while the rest of the sculpture looks like junk, right? You want to work overall, get it where it needs to be, and then gradually overall you're kind of bouncing around hitting different areas. If you watch any videos online of speed modeling or speed sculpting, you'll see that they're always like bouncing around. They're looking at the back of the head, the front of the head, the eyes, the nose, the mouth. They're constantly jumping around into these areas. I'm going to do a little clay buildup here, just kind of, it's way too big. Kind of push that in some, just kind of smooth that out. I'm only at 21,000 points, so I really don't want to add any sharpness, but I just want to see at this point what it would look like. So I'm just kind of crisping up the lips using that damn standard brush. So you can see right there we got this nice crisp lip on top, and then I'm going to add a little bit of clay buildup for the bottom lip and help blend that in. The mouth is like one of the hardest areas to do. You might think it's the eyes, but it's actually the mouth. And I tell people, I said, think of the mouth as just like this shape that's right here. This just kind of curves around like this. And the mouth is actually like inside that area. Yeah. Okay? So it's very tricky to do. On paper, it's one thing, but then to try to actually sculpt it and get an idea of what it's supposed to look like is a bit tricky. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Oops, bigger, smooth it out. So this could probably soften a little bit more. That's good. All right, so at this point, he's still good. Maybe I want to go and grab these points of the mouth. Right, and you can kind of think of a story too, like if your character is, you know, if he's an underwater character, maybe his mouth wouldn't be as big, or maybe it would be. You know, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. There we go. Is he a happy guy? Is he a sad guy? This guy is obviously a cranky guy. Add a little bit more to the cheeks. There we go. All right. Now we're not going to sculpt ears on the character, but you can think of other things you could add to the character for that kind of thing. So like let's say this guy, I'm going to save him. Just hit Control S and say ZBrush head. Oops, head 001. Boom. And I'm going to save him again as 002, just so I don't ruin 001. There we go. So what I can do here is, let's say that I wanted to, there we go. I hit V on accident. B, M, V, there we go. I can like pull up areas like this, right? I can kind of give them like horns. I could push in areas like this using my clay buildup. Too big. Like this. I think that's probably too high also. Let's put it right about there. And what I'm doing is just creating those indicators of different details that I want inside here. Okay. Now again, at this resolution, we're not seeing a whole lot of detail in there, but that's fine. We would get the detail later on. So I'm going to smooth this out just so he's nice and smooth. There we go. And then I could do my Control D again to smooth them out more. I'm going to clay build up, but I'm pushing it inward. I did not start off wanting to do a cat, but I think this is going to be adorable. And then a little bit of smoothing. And then go into the back side, making this a little bit flatter. And again, there's more than one way to do this. I'm doing it this one way, but you'll see all the different brushes that are here. There's actually somewhere in the F's, there's a flatten. So if I hit F, and then I go to L, I think it is. Oh, A. A. There's actually a flatten. Oops, too strong. Let's just crank you down some. There we go. So what this does is it just flattens out that piece of geometry. Okay. There's also one called polish, and this just kind of crisps up some of these edges, just so that shape kind of holds a little bit tighter in some of those areas. Oh, I think that's ready to print. There we go. It's like a weird cat slash what's that guy from? Hellboy. Thank you. I was thinking Hellraiser. That's how old I am. There we go. So again, we can kind of push this in some. Maybe make a little bit of indication out here that there's some sort of underlying structure that's making the ear kind of bumped in. And this is where you can see the benefit of going to a lower level. At this, I'm trying to smooth this out as best I can, but sometimes it's difficult because there's so many points there that it's trying to smooth out. So going to a smaller level may help kind of transition that better. Oops. Make this bigger, hold down Alt. Wrong Alt. Come on, there we go. Gorgeous. All right, so what I'm going to do is just keep doing the same exact thing. I'm just going to refine it and then add more detail, refine it and add more detail. The dam standard is great for doing these sharp lines. So where I have the eyes, I'm going to use the dam standard, and where I have these lips, I'm going to use the dam standard, and I'm just going to push that in. Now, a lot of the success of me doing this like this, where the mouth is actually like I've only done a little bit to it, is because inside of Cinema, it was already set up right? So if I don't set it up perfectly inside Cinema, it's not a deal breaker, it's just I have to do more work here. So you want to kind of make as little work as possible inside of this tool that you have to. It just makes things a lot easier to do it there. I think this needs to come out a bit more like that. And then I'm softening it. There we go. All right, so now what I want to do is add some eyes to this, because the eyes obviously are going to help shape the eyelids. So this is the part, ZBrush is an amazing tool. This is the worst part of it, is moving anything inside of ZBrush. So I'm going to my subtool, okay, and this is kind of like layers for your stuff. So my head is on one layer, my eyeball will be on the next layer down. So I'm going to insert a subtool, and I'm going to insert a sphere, which is right there. So you'll see I get this huge sphere right on top of this. There is a move tool. It's right here. The move tool is, like I said, it's a horrible tool because it's like crazy confusing. Like all I want is 3 arrows. That's all I need for my move tool. But they give you this monstrosity here. And what it does, I'm going to hit X just to turn my symmetry off. I'm going to click and drag, and I get this tool. Now to move stuff, you would think you could just grab this, but no, this actually like scales stuff. And because I'm on my cat layer, it's going to scale that. So I'm going to hit undo, click the sphere, do this, and you'll see how it's flattening it. I don't know why that's even an option. But you have to grab this middle area, and then you can move this around. So what I'm going to do is kind of move it to about there. I'm going to switch to my scale tool. Now the scale tool, I would grab the far end one and shrink it down. And then shrink it down. Now I'm trying to get this to roughly the size of his eye, which is about there. Go to the move tool, grab the middle one, and then scoot it over. Switch to my side view.
I see what you're doing.
Yeah. It's horrible, isn't it? It's a horrible tool. So all I'm doing is trying to click and drag to move this out, and then just kind of moving this inward like this. And then switching to this side, and then maybe pulling it out some. He's going to have bigger eyes. But you can do it inside Cinema too. You can place it inside Cinema so that when you bring it in here, you'll have the eye right there. But it's not too bad. You can see I quickly put it there. Okay. Now to get the eye on the other side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and then just move this over. There we go. Okay. Not too bad, but it is like kind of a pain because I just want the other one. So now once I have those eyes there, then they're just kind of like locked and I never have to touch them again until we start painting it. But now I can go through and start to sculpt these eyelids. So I'm going to go back to my brushes. So I switch back to the draw tool. I go back to my clay buildup, and then I can start to pull up some of this area here. Oops. Make sure I'm on symmetry again. So it does it to both sides. Yep. Now you can see just by adding some clay buildup here, I'm actually creating like little bags under the eyes or little wrinkles. And I can do the same thing on top. And then I can start to shape what this is going to look like. Switch to my move tool, and I can start to pull down, oops, too big, pull down some of these areas. Pull up some of these areas. Okay, maybe I'll hit it with a little bit of softness here. I think I want that down a little bit further. I can always switch down to a lower level also and start to tweak stuff. And it's typically a little bit easier to kind of shape these bigger detail or these finer details when we're at a different level. And then I can hit D and just kind of smooth it out again. Hit D again and pull this down some. A little bit of clay buildup here just because I want to have that extra little bit of skin right there. Okay, so I'm just tapping D every time I want to just go back to that higher level. I'm not hitting Control D Control D makes a new level. We already have the level there. I just need to hit D to get back into it. And I can see up here where I'm at. I'm at 86, so when I hit D again, it should take me to, well, it would take me to the next one, but I don't have a next one. The rest of this is from the eyes. So I would hit Control D if I need more detail. There we go. Okay, and again, you want to look at it from different views. It's very easy to get locked into here, and then what happens is you turn it, and the eyelid is like way out here, and the eyeball is like way back there. So you have to look at it from different views. So now I can use my Damien standard brush and kind of push in some of that. Maybe a little bit more intensity. There we go. Perfect. When I said perfect, I meant I had to undo it. There we go. And a little bit of softness here. There we go. I can switch back to my clay buildup brush, just kind of build it up a little bit more and then smooth it in. All right, for now it'll be good enough. It's gorgeous. So once I'm done, let's pretend that I've added my horns, I've added the eyes, I've added the mouth, and everything's looking cool. And then I'm going to subdivide it again, and then I can start to add more detail to it. So remember, we have the skin pores things here under this alpha. There's also, if I switch to here, if I go to textures.com, they actually have inside here, they have 3D brushes, they have 3D scans, and they have some substance stuff. Anything that is a black and white image, you can use for a brush. They also have on ZBrush's page, they have ZBrush brushes. ZBrushes. They have loads of different kinds of brushes. And this is where there's actually a guy, his name is Michael something? I don't know. I get emails from him like every day. Basically, he makes brushes and he makes alpha channels and texture maps and everything for ZBrush. So the cool thing is, like, let's say you're doing a character and you want to do a belt buckle, you want to do buttons or whatever. Just to quickly show you inside ZBrush, all of these ones here, like this army one. Here's clothing. I'll do that one. Oops. I'm hitting the wrong button. What am I hitting? Nope. I thought it was H. That's not H. Nope. I can't think of the correct tool. There it is. It is M. I just wasn't hitting it enough times, I guess. So I hit M. What it brings up is all of these different pieces of geometry that you could then add to your character. So let's say for whatever reason I needed a snap-on right on my character. So I can go right to, let's say here where his temple is, and I could, I'm going to change this to drag. There we go. And I'm going to drag, whatever. Let me duplicate him real quick. You have to have your stuff frozen, so I'm just going to freeze this. I'm going to hide the one that's under here so I don't see it. I have to freeze him at the highest level. I don't know why I didn't do that. Delete lower. That'll work. And then hide the other one. Good. Okay. So now I can click and drag on here, and you can see how I can add just this like button to him, which is kind of neat. And there's also other ones like zippers. So I hit M again. I can go to a zipper, and then there we go. So now he has a zipper on his face. Okay, so that's part of what makes ZBrush awesome. But there's also like all of these things that you can also add to it. Okay, so these are actual 3D pieces of geometry that you could add to your character. In here, these are all just textures. So basically, when I pulled the scales out, that was a texture map saying, just like the bump, I want to pull out those areas. So you can go to things like skins. Woo. And you could find a skin that you want to use. So like here's a pig's nose and here's like his snout area. They also have like veins. They have elephant skin. They have all these different pores and veins and whatever else stuff. All you do is you download them, whichever one you want. And then in ZBrush, you can just go to, let me switch us back to my standard brush, BST. There we go. You go to your alpha, and then you'll be able to import any texture. So any black and white image you can import, and it'll actually be an image you could paint onto your character. So for this one, I'm just going to grab these skin pores for now. I'm going to delete this guy because I don't really need that. I'm going to turn this one back on. There he is. Okay. So then what I want to do is after I've gotten to that point, I'm just going to add some divisions like 5 million. And I'm going to go through and paint in. Come on. Yeah, that's good. Maybe I'll just go to spray. Let's see what that looks like. Whoa, too much. Just take that down a notch. There we go. So now I'm painting in basically just like skin pores. And you can see how these are going onto the surface. Now if I make the brush huge, these skin pores are going to be huge, and that's going to look really odd. So you always want to make sure you're staying in a consistent size as you paint this stuff in there. Okay. Now, unfortunately, inside of ZBrush, there is no layering system that we could use. If you've ever tried Mudbox, Mudbox actually allows you to layer in your stuff. So, like this detail that I'm adding here is like basically baked into the surface. In Mudbox, I basically have a layer. I can do all my stuff to this layer, then I can turn it off and see what it looks like without that, or turn it back on, or I can change the opacity to control how bumpy it still is. So I'm going to go through and just add some more detail to this like that. There we go. I'll add some detail down here. And then I can switch to, let's say, the straight lines like this. And it's a lot easier to do this with a tablet just because you want this to be soft. And then I can start to add in some lines for like the lips. So you can see how the lips are now having like those little lines that lips typically have. Okay, we could also go in here to like the Damien standard tool, the Dam standard tool, and I could add in like little creases. Oops. I can change my focal shift too. So like this is really broad, like that, and then this one's gonna be really sharp. So finding something in the middle of this focal shift to create like a little indicator there might be kind of cool. Maybe some extra lines here I could add in also. So you can see how we can add so many different lines and detail pieces inside here, just to kind of help shape what this character is looking like. Blend that in a little bit. Okay, so after you've gotten him out of Cinema, your next step is to take him into ZBrush and get to the point where he has a lot of detail inside of him. Okay, I've gone into just the basic detail, but you can add a whole bunch of stuff to here. Typically, I would probably spend a lot more time on these eyes and the mouth. This mouth actually turned out pretty decent with the amount of time I spent on it. I definitely want to do something different with the ears than just this because that looks funny. I'd probably want to pull them down. So like that. If I did something like that, as he gets smoother, it becomes more easy to see that it goes somewhere and not just like into his head and stops there. So we get the illusion that he has more of an ear than just, you know, a bump. Yeah, so that's all right. Okay, so make sure you're saving your stuff. Every time you hit Control S, you do have to rename it, which is a good thing because you want to make sure you're saving iterations of this in case one craps out. You can always jump back to the other ones. Okay? So, all right. So that should get you all the way to this point of having your character, lots of detail on the face. Not like you don't need anything crazy. I just want it more refined. Things like eyebrows and stuff. Not the actual eyebrows, but just the regular part of this. And then just to show too, for fun, I guess. There's fibers on here, which is, I think it's just fun to see. There he is. And then you can go to the modifiers, and there's a whole bunch of stuff inside here you can play with. Here's my gravity profile. So this is basically like how much it's falling downward. So the higher this is, the more gravity. And then there's the coverage, so I could have less. And then what's cool too is that all of these are basically there's just geometry. So once I actually hit accept, sure, I'll get a new subtool that is my hair. And then I can go through and, just like my regular move brush, I can go ahead and move some of the hair into different places if I wanted to, which is kind of neat. And you can also paint it too, so if you only wanted it to be in certain spots. I can go, let's say he has a beard. So I'm going to hold down Control, which is something you'll commonly do, and do that. So that's his beard. So now I go back to my fibers. I hit preview. Oops, I did it wrong. Control click. There we go. And then of course we can say max fibers or less, definitely. The length of them is really like a whole lot. He's Alright, lots of different things in here you can play with, which is super awesome. There's no gravity on it. We just have to go into the actual gravity and say, you know, pull down more. Or right, depending on what we want. Alright, so enough fun. So that's where you're going to take this after you get out of cinema. Then it's loads of fun inside here. The next step after this would be then to go through and actually paint the texture on there using this similar type of approach, adding different colors, and then obviously adding some lights and then rendering it out of here and then bringing it into Photoshop for a nice awesome still. Okay? Cool? Cool. Any questions? All right.